Break my face and it was the kindest touch you ever gave. Wrap my dreams around your thighs and drape my hope upon the chance to touch your arm. Fabulous muscles, cremate me after you come on my...
My name is Adrian Lawyer, and I'm the Executive Director of the Transgender Resource Center of New Mexico. The Transgender Resource Center of New Mexico is an agency that exists just to serve transgender people and our families and loved ones. And we started the organization back in 2008. We began with some support groups that were being held mainly in people's homes and in borrowed spaces with partner organizations. And also we started out with our Speakers Bureau and our Transgender 101 educational program. So those were some of our early programs. Oh, and our website. We put up a website right away in 2008 to try to collect and compile known resources like competent, friendly healthcare providers, and make sure that people knew where they could go and be safe and receive different services and different types of access. And then over the years since that started, we realized that the issues were way deeper than just support groups and Trans 101 can handle.
Jacqueline Michelle Clifford. A lot of people see, when they look at gender, they look at the binary spectrum. They look from male to female. They see that, or reference or tend to reference everything on a spectrum, whether it's the physical gender, the presentation of their gender identity, their sexual orientation, their genetics. To me, all of that combines into one sphere, and if you look at it kind of like all of that put together in like a Munsell color system, it creates a sphere. And if you follow it through, every person in the world is at a different point on that sphere. So everyone is gender variant, their own gender. Gender is made up of your genetics, your chromosomes. We're aware of that. That tends to deal more with physical presentation, although there's chromosomal issues that can come in to play, for example, de la Chapelle syndrome or Swyer syndrome.
Person is interacting with you. I think interestingly the word transgender is one of the new things. So that really didn't come into being until the 80s. And I don't think really got popular, really gained popular acceptance until more like the 90s. So the word transgender is a modern invention that we now are retrofitting onto people like Billy Tipton, who wouldn't have said I'm transgender, he wouldn't have even had that word. But he knew that he was male, and he lived his life as a male. He married 2 different women and was a male person his whole entire life, at a time I think when it probably was a little simpler to have your identity documents line up. It wasn't the time of the Patriot Act and all of this that we deal with now.
My name is Kenneth Anslone. Some people know me as To Kill a Mockingbird. And we started the Dolls probably 17, 18 years ago. We do about 3 plays a year. Most of them are written by myself, and I love writing, that's my passion. And that's when we were like, well, how about starting a theater group? And I said, oh. And then I was like, well, what about a drag theater troupe? Because we've always, felt comfortable doing the female roles. We always identified with, the actresses, and thought that was far more exciting.
Yesterday was my last day with Princess Lotus Blonde. Camera! Action! Please can get
missing most people that did. I mean, your body is
Which fascinates me is, people's perception of, drag, transvestite, cross-dressing, and, transsexual, and it's interesting how people kind of all lump that together, and, there's many reasons for that. I think movies, for instance, Tu Wong Fu comes to mind. A funny movie, but, and it's about three, drag queens. But they do it 24/7, and they go on this cross-country trip, in the middle of summer, and they're all, in drag, driving. No drag queen would do that, but I think that lends itself to people believing that if you do drag, you that's who you are, and they don't see the difference between that and a transvestite and a transsexual, and they kind of lump it all together, which is not the case.
Well, I'm really lucky. I mean, my story is one of the ones that's just almost not even interesting because I was so lucky. My family of origin was really cool. I mean, they each took their own time, I think, to transition, with me. Transition is this inherently sort of self-centered thing where I am breaking this unbreakable rule to try to be the person I know I'm supposed to be, right? And it takes all this sort of momentum and traction to do it because it's daunting. People don't want you to do it. The world doesn't want you to do that.
In my experience, a lot of the girls have been disowned by their families or their culture, or their religions, various religions, and things like that. So they're basically disowned.
My name is Brigitte Barbara Belston, BB for short, and nobody can say Brigitte always. Like one of my sons said, my father's dead. Well, it's pretty much a big exaggeration, but they refuse to accept and understand it. Some kids eventually come around, and I've sent them documentation, what the American Medical Association said, the American Psychiatric Association, they don't want to. So
Myself, even though I transitioned much later in life, when I made that decision, and I sent the letter home to my dad, he stopped. My entire family stopped communicating with me. Basically, I was on the outs.
When kids even now say, I feel like I'm a boy, people around them don't say, well, that's cool. There's surgeries and things will, it's going to be fine, right? They say, don't ever say that again, right? So it's a hard thing to come out and to do hormones and to do all these things because you feel like you're fighting upstream to do it. So I think we sometimes forget then that that the word transition is really descriptive for everyone in your life, not just for you. We talk about transition and mean things like surgeries and name changes and coming out, when really everyone has to transition, everyone has to change along with you changing.
I actually dated a person and a woman when I was in Richmond, Virginia, and after we dated for a while, I asked her if she was transgender, and she had never even heard of that before, and so she started researching it on the internet, and as a result, we ended up going to a lot of transgender conferences, which made me a lot more comfortable with it and more aware of the issues and the dynamics, and she is now living full-time as a he, has been a he for the last 10 years, I believe, very happy, very well adjusted. MCC churches were started back in 1968 by Reverend Troy Perry, and at that time there was not any churches that were really welcoming and celebrating the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender community. So he started one in Los Angeles, California, and we quickly spread across the United States, and he actually started a year before the Stonewall riots, and he was quite the protester and mover and shaker in the day. I would want transgender people to know that, like MCC churches and hopefully other churches that are open and affirming, will celebrate and honor who you are. Like we have Transgender Day of Awareness. We have a naming ceremony or a ritual for people that are, changing from male to female. They're welcome to come here and we can do a ritual with them, and baptize them, anoint them, whatever speaks to them, and give them their new name. And I think that can be exciting and very affirming, and that God celebrates with them as they're on this incredible journey that they're on. We've been on the forefront of this since 1968, and some churches will seek our input. Others act like we don't exist. One of our grooms there.
I think the more we're able to talk about this openly and get this education out there, the more people can at least have these internal dialogues about their own, sexualities and their own gender expression and their own gender identity, and have the realization, I think, that we're really all on this continuum, and that nobody is, whatever the prototype is supposed to be, nobody is that.
Just to